So welcome everybody to a new episode of our Immersive Media Trailblazers series. And we have the pleasure today to welcome George Fifield and Michael Lewy, who are both practitioners in the field of art curation and AR art curation. So I'll start with you, George. Let me just say thank you first and foremost for participating.
Well, we wanted to start talking, I think, about very early augmented reality art. And the very first accepted history in the history of AR is this show that took place at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2010, October 2010, and it was called We Are AR in MoMA. And it was a number of artists from around the world organized by Manifest AR, which was an artist collective. And they all put their works up in the Museum of Modern Art. And all of a sudden, you had these people wandering around the museum, looking through their phones. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Oh, isn't that great? The security guards had no idea what was going on and got very upset. But they called down the curatorial people who figured out what was going on and got really excited and said, "This is great, keep it up." Yep. And that was the first official show. The next year was the 2011 Cyberarts Festival. They had gotten in touch with me and they said, "We want to know what we can do to be in an institution that knows about us and have our AR art." And we did that for the 2011 Cyberarts Festival.
And you're also, in addition to all this early work you've done in AR, and this pioneering work, I should say, you're also the director of the Boston Cyber Art Gallery.
Yes.
Where you're welcoming many AR and VR artists. And when we met, it was a few years ago when you and I collaborate on a project for the Boston Greenway. There's a little video. Do you mind if I play that and you can maybe give us a little
please do
background on the artist? And
at this point, the curators from the Greenway came to me and said, "We want AR in this exhibition we're doing called the Auto Show." So they had a theme already. And we got 3 artists, each of whom did 2 pieces. This is Nancy Baker Cahill's Speed. Of course, she doesn't know how to drive really, but she did say that she does know the 2 things about cars are that they speed and that they collision. This is Will Pappenheimer's Car Park X. And Will says that in the future, we'll get out of our car and we'll press a button and the car will go flying up to this magnetic ball of cars above our heads, which hasn't taken place yet. But it's really fun to be sitting in downtown Boston, staring up at the sky and seeing this above you. It also, everybody did 2 pieces. This is Will's first work. And it was very, and this is her second work, Collision. Nancy Baker Cahill is an LA artist who does augmented reality work that's relatively abstract. So I was really curious, how is she going to come up with an idea about an automobile in an abstract way? Well, she did a brilliant job, I think. Mm-hmm. And whap.
That was an amazing piece, yes.
Yeah, and then it crashes down. This is John Craig Freeman, who teaches at Emerson. He did a piece. He did this piece where he apparently found a guy up in New Hampshire who collects old gas pumps. And he went up and he documented all of them. You see in the back, he's got a couple spinning around. He also, which was, I thought, interesting, got the sound of them. I don't know if you... From my childhood, I remember some gas pumps would go ding, 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 ding as they made the gas. And that was one of them. This is Will's second piece, quite evil, as it falls and crashes to the ground and explodes. I was the one who shot all these videos. And so I will tell you, that one, my heart was a little bit in my mouth. And you can see as the pans over, oh, I love the shadow too. And then this is the other piece by John Craig Freeman called
Roadside Detritus, yeah.
referencing the highway that started up and drove through Boston on the elevated, which they then buried to make the Greenway. And of course, John's also interested in global warming, so he was concerned with how high the waters could rise in downtown Boston. So that was the our part of the auto show, but there were other parts that were real sculptures. But then they also got a historian who found old pictures of those parts of Boston and put them up with AR, and so you could see all of a sudden, oh, that's what that building looked like then, with this green structure in front of it, or which I had no idea there was a trolley which ran from South Station to North Station. So you could get off of the train in South Station and pop up in North Station.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's tied to history as well as kind of a forward-looking vision, through arts in one exhibit. Just maybe a few words. You also, prior to that, worked on an exhibit that I had seen myself. We didn't know each other, but in Salem. Can you tell us a few words about that? Just kind of the background of that exhibit?
Well, because of the show that we did in 2011 at the Cyberarts Festival at the ICA, I became enamored with AR and wanted to see really big augmented reality sculptures. But of course, I had to find a place to do it. And I finally hooked up with the director of the Salem National Historic Maritime Park, which is really the place that was the first and major port of the colonies before New York and Boston. And I invited 4 artists to come and do that. Craig Freeman, Will Pappenheimer, Tamiko Teal, and Kristen Lucas. And what impressed me no end was all 4 of them immediately figured out the importance of the site we were showing at. I only gave them one direction, which was I was asked by the head of the Salem Arts Council, no witches, please. So I told them that, but they all came up with something completely different about the site. And in fact, one of the most poignant was Kristen Lucas's, which was just all these AR pictures of people waving goodbye. And this of a site where we're leaving didn't mean being gone for a couple of weeks. It meant being gone for a couple of years until you came back to your wife and kids and stuff. And I thought that was a very poignant piece. That was, it's been a lot of fun doing this. And we've done a couple other works since. Will Pappenheimer invented an entire augmented sky writing device. And we went and did skywriting over every town in Newton for a project.
And I have some question already that pops in my mind around some of the specifics around curating for virtual AR content versus physical content. What I like to do is pass it to maybe Michael, so that Michael, you can tell us about your exhibit, and I can ask questions to both of you because you have maybe slightly different perspective and experiences that could be kind of a good combination here. So Michael, if you don't mind jumping in, can you show us a little bit about this exhibit I was talking about, what you've done?
So the exhibit that I curated is called Alpha 60, and it's a science fiction themed augmented reality show that takes place in the Emerald Necklace, and it's 19 artists and over 21 artworks. And one of the things that really interested me about augmented reality was and also using the Hoverlay app was that it had a very low, I didn't have to be a programmer to use it. And I've been experimenting with augmented reality for a while, and I was getting sort of frustrated. I was using like Unity, and I really couldn't do GPS augmented reality on my own, where it was like tied to a specific place. And I kind of felt like for an exhibition, especially one outside, a public exhibition, that you would really need to be able to like tie it to a place. And Hoverlay sort of enabled me to do this. So what I was going to show is I was just going to show a few of the artists that I work with. So one of the other things about this show that I found was really interesting to me was working with artists. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Working with artists who weren't programmers, who were just traditional artists, and figuring out a way that we could take that art and sort of bring it into AR. Mm-hmm. And have people experience it that way. This is a map of all the artworks. The big circles are actually, I just put these in. This is to view the map in augmented reality. But the other ones are all the artworks. And then the first artist, so this is the first artist I worked with, and his name is Richard Seja. And he was he worked in embroidery. And he made these beautiful, I think you pronounce it toile. I never know how to pronounce it. He took these beautiful toile pieces and he would embroider over them like crazy pictures. And he called it historically inaccurate. And so we worked on a couple different things, and he has made these bolsters, these creatured bolsters, which are actually physical objects. And we had talked a lot about how we would bring those into AR. And we experimented with scanning, like doing it as a 3D object. And what we finally decided to do was to do them as green screen videos. And what I did was he sent me his piece. I shot it against a white background. And then I brought it into After Effects, and then we put them in the landscape. And I animated them slightly just to give some movement. And then we added some sound from a sound artist. Okay, and then this is a painter who I found on the internet, and I just loved his paintings. And for me, it sort of invoked this very weird sort of science fictional quality to it. And I sort of saw these as monuments. So what we did was he sent me his, scans of his paintings, and then I took them into Photoshop and we cut them out and we put those in the landscape. Those are two of the paintings. These are them in the landscape. And this is in Franklin Park. There are two different places in Franklin Park. And then these are, so the other idea behind the show was I really wanted to try to show some successful artists with underrepresented artists that weren't represented as much. And sort of like the idea was to, as a collaborative process, also kind of bring the artists up together. This is, so I contacted Nicholas Kahn and Richard, actually Nicholas Kahn, I didn't talk to Richard Selznick, but Kahn and Selznick, who these artists have always loved, and they make really amazing work. And they have this, and we were dialoguing through Instagram, actually. I contacted Nicholas through Instagram, and he answered me, and we went back and forth. And he had this piece, and this is a Rary box that they built. And basically, it's like an old sort of 18th century peep show that they built out of cardboard. So I got the idea that I was going to try to build it digitally and then put their artwork inside of it. So this is, I built this in Cinema 4D, and this is some of their artwork. This is a photograph, and then also a video. And we placed those in the landscape. So you can actually walk up to these and like look inside them and see the artwork inside them. That's it for the video. Oops.
This is great.
So yeah, so for me, it was a lot about working with the artist, really collaborating with them, I was really interested in. That's basically where I came from.
This is really cool. And let me throw my first question again. I invite you all, in the audience to type in your questions, thoughts, any comments you want to make here. We can make this really interactive. So let me start by asking you, this new medium you create the illusion of presence of an art piece that is actually digital. So you're kind of getting in this weird boundary between kind of a physical art installation and a virtual art installation. So what are some of the differences that you're seeing in curating a digital exhibition versus a physical art installation? George, I don't know, maybe I'll start with you there if you have any thoughts around.
Before I answer that, I just want to say about Alpha 60 and another project we did with Michael teaching other artists. But the idea of expanding the pool of artists who can work in this medium is very important, and it's what's going to grow the medium to be like video art. It was one of the things that Nam June Paik, one of the very first video artists, he wanted to get as many video artists, as much competition as he could get, to work on his art form. So knowing that would be what made it last, and I think that's what we're trying to do here too. And congratulations, Michael. That's a great idea. So in terms of, it's very interesting, and it's only going to change. But at the moment, you're still told you have to carry this device around and look through it. Maybe it's an iPad, maybe it's just your phone, but that is both limiting and empowering. One of the things that when you do one of these things, like when we did it in the Greenway, I could go to Nicholas and say, how many people saw it? And he could look on the list and he could tell me. But I always multiplied that by 3, because I would see 3 people walking shoulder to shoulder. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So it's a very communal way of looking at art, because the instrumentation forces you to look at it with other people, which I find interesting. There's no other art form really like that. And certainly not virtual reality, which I'm not a big fan on, because it is so close you off and you're the only one experiencing it. But with augmented reality, it's magical. It just appears in front of you and it goes away. But 2, it's a joining of experiences by multiple people. And I think that's one of the things that makes it different. When you go into an art gallery, if you see something on the wall, you're the only one who's really looking at it, unless you're talking about it with the person next to you. But with virtual reality, with augmented reality, you're really looking at it together with a crowd. And the other thing is that it is this magical thing. It isn't there, and then it appears. And I love that aspect of it. I love that thought of art, that physical art, that it just shows up and then goes away. And it is because you can turn on or turn off your phone. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and absolutely. And just to add to my initial point, how do you feel or think about location in art? Like this, because you make something appear, but you make it appear somewhere, right? Versus, like something that you can make appear anywhere. There's an element of scarcity almost, and connection with the environment in which the art piece is placed or virtually placed. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts around that? You mentioned the Salem, the interplay between the location of that exhibit and the arts, but any guidance, any thoughts? And Michael, I'll ask you the same question after that, because you've seen your map with all the placements, how you went about that.
Well, first of all, you can make this stuff really big. The biggest artwork ever made was an augmented reality piece of green cubes that floated in space, and they expanded until they surrounded the entire Earth. It was conceptual, but they were there if you went to look at them. And I looked at them out in my backyard, and there they were. So it's very interesting, the technical lack of limitations for what you can do with this. And then there's the fact that you can place it anywhere, and you can, the mathematics of placing is, there's a interesting one where I'm not going to forget, some company came to a bunch of different artists and asked them to make augmented reality art, and a hacker hacked one of them and sprayed graffiti all over it. You know who I'm thinking of?
Is that the one in
It was in Central Park.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's that idea that you can come after somebody's made a piece and remake their piece in a way.
Right.
If you have this,
Jeff Koons, it was Jeff Koons' piece. Yes.
It was Jeff Koons's piece. Yes, exactly. And so you can, there's all sorts of, because it's in code, there's all sorts of freedoms you have around where to place it and how to place it and what to do with it. I know that, and right now there's a group of women artists in New York who are using AR to reconceptualize male-oriented sculptures in New York to be femininely oriented sculptures in New York, which is a project I love.
This is great. And yeah, I can see why the contextualization makes complete sense, to experience those on site versus, look at a video on YouTube is a very different experience.
Yes. Looking at any video is a different experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Michael, on your end, I mean, you've shown us the map, and how did you go about, trying to find this connection between places and content?
Well, I knew that I wanted to work with a lot of different artists, and some of them were artists who were really site specific, and they really told me where they wanted to place the artwork inside the emerald necklace. And then other ones, I picked the location because they weren't here. We would go back and forth. Like I would place the artwork. Like I started placing the artwork in my backyard, and I would show them this is how it would look outside, and then I would go take pictures. It was a real process of like going to the site, photographing it, placing the artwork there, and really sort of like figuring out where it looked best. It wasn't, I don't think it's a lot of it. There's only really one piece I think that has significance to the location. It's Heather Kaplow's piece, and she grew up across from the site. So it had a real significance from her. And it's actually, her piece is really far away from all the other pieces because of she wanted it to be in the specific site in the emerald necklace. So we had to sort of balance that kind of thing, I think. And as far as the differences between a regular show, I've curated one other show actually with George. We curated a science fiction show years ago at the Cyberarts Gallery. And for me, the big difference, I think, with AR, and one thing that really attracted me was the fact that I could do this all on my own. Like I didn't need a grant, I didn't need money, I didn't need any institution. I could just really like place the artwork and, get the artist, and like, the show's been up for like a year. So it's really like a work in progress. And I really wanted to make it something before I started to like, publicize it or look for a sponsor or look for someone to help me publicize like the Cyberarts Gallery. So I think that's, for me, gave me a lot of freedom. I'm an artist in the show too. So that's the other thing too. So I'm an artist curator. So, and that's a lot of times you're told not to do that. But for me, it was about taking control. Like I got tired of being rejected for things, honestly. So I was like, I'm going to make my own exhibition. I think that's what attracted me to the Cyberarts Gallery too, is when we did that show. It's like, I hadn't seen a lot of shows about, that were science fiction themed shows. I was making this work and I didn't know quite how it fit in. So I was like, I'm going to find other artists that I'm going to show with. And it was a really great experience, I think, for me.
We should say the official opening to Alpha 60 is May 22nd. And it's going to be at the Cyberarts Gallery. And Michael has a piece in the Cyberarts Gallery, 3 pieces actually, in the Cyberarts Gallery. But that should just be your starting off point, and then walk around using the map and see the rest of them.
But I think there's an interesting point in what both of you have said, which is that this kind of almost grassroots or kind of underground, not ground, but aspect of, because Michael, as you described it, I mean, I suspect you didn't go and ask for permission to place your art pieces in the parks, right? You just went ahead and, I mean, you may have, I don't know, but and you talked, George, about the We Are in MoMA, which is also kind of utilizing what you call, this lack of physical, how do you call this, physical limitations, like to take advantage of placing content without requiring, lengthy approvals or, and so I'm just wondering if how you think about this aspect of augmented reality as something that's very much could become an underground.
There's a long theme in AR art, from AR We Are in MoMA to today, of it being protest art, of it being underground. For example, when they were doing the what was it called? Something Wall Street. You couldn't.
Occupy Wall Street.
You could occupy Wall Street. You couldn't actually go onto Wall Street. The police wouldn't let you. You could march around it, but you couldn't go onto it. But there were tons of augmented reality things actually on Wall Street that you could put there, because you can put them anywhere.
Yeah, for me, I was really like interested in the MoMA show, and I didn't realize that, like, also doing a little bit of research about augmented reality too, is that it was interesting is it's really new. It doesn't, that, and it still is like in its infancy too. So, so that really interests me. And also just the fact that it was a guerrilla thing. I didn't ask for permission. I think I maybe I did let the Emerald Necklace Conservatory know. And I think I did ask the city of Boston afterwards, just tell them what I was doing. So, but
yeah, that really
hopefully will stay that way. I wonder if it will stay that way.
Well, I'm not sure anybody can take it down anyway. So, that's, let me jump to another interesting topic. Michael, you were talking about you working with artists that had no particular AR experience. I'm just curious, what was your approach and what did you learn in that process of getting them on board?
It's funny because it's really different, depends on the artist itself. Like some were really like Richard was so amazed that I took his upholstered beasts and like animated them. I was always nervous, like taking the artwork and like how much say they wanted. It went really back and forth. I mean, some of the artists, the Hoverlay app is pretty easy to use. So some of the artists were really just, they did it themselves. And I didn't know how much, I gave them the option. I wanted them, because I wanted to convince artists who, like a painter, who would never think of doing that, utilizing augmented reality. And I wanted it not to be like a box either. Like I didn't want you to go into this, I wanted them to merge with the landscape. So I didn't I was really kind of insistent that we think of ways to like take the artwork and like merge it into the landscape. Rather than, I mean, I could have just showed it, all the paintings, we could have just showed it as squares, but I wanted to cut them out and really like make them into something sort of else.
And do you think that some of these artists that have experience went through this process with you, do you see them more able to, expand their art to that medium? Or
I think they could if they wanted to, sure.
Hopefully they will.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, your point was correct. I think we still have, relatively few artists experimenting, and Michael, just what you saw, I mean, just the creativity, and you can tell like it's just a natural, it feels so natural as an evolution of what people are using as a current medium to AR, and it feels like, we could do a lot more to get people to be trained, to be competent, to even try it out.
Yeah, the thing about I think that the thing too is I think thinking of it in different ways was really interesting. I used a lot of video. I used a lot of green screen video. For my piece, I created a turntable so I could put myself on a turntable. And because if you spun, I noticed that if you took an object and you spun it 360 degrees in video, it really gave the illusion of being like three-dimensional without being three-dimensional. I tried to get, I was just looking at this artist today, I tried to get this artist who's a collage artist involved, and we couldn't connect, but I think it has this capacity for collage, which is really interesting, because you can layer things on top of each other, pictures on videos on 3D objects. And I haven't really seen a lot of that being done. And that's something I'm sort of interested in sort of exploring, that idea that you can layer things in space.
Yeah, this is fascinating. George, any thoughts on this, on the kind of how do we get more artists to, jump into this medium?
Well, I think it's like all technologies. The very first artists who are interested in it are interested in actually breaking the technology and seeing what they can do with it. Again, Nam June always comes to mind as a pioneer in a specific technology, video, and he did in his career, he did everything. He like anticipated everything that everybody was going to do with video. Didn't do it well, but he did it. And now we've got this. Now we're in this more, I won't say adult, but I will say adolescent stage of AR art, where people are really still exploring it, and some of them are doing clandestine work, but some of them are doing just straight artwork that's meant to be seen as an art form. And curators, curators are very important to this conversation, and I'm glad to be one that's leading the charge. And there are others, and so you need more of all of these people, and you need to give them support. We're getting regular requests for shows now, Boston Cyberarts, for augmented reality exhibitions. And I really want to start to fill those with new AR artists. We're going to do one next in the fall in North Adams at the installation space. And I'm looking for new artists who haven't done this before necessarily.
Right. Yeah, this is great. One last question I wanted to ask you, which is related before we open it up to, for everybody with their own questions here. It's around the preservation of those art pieces. So unlike, physical art, I mean, these are, bits and bytes that are floating somewhere in the cloud, and so it's been a topic we've talked about it. I've heard that discussion. I had the discussion with many artists about, how can we help preserve these as technology stacks evolve, players evolve, and just opening this up for you and for the audience about some possible emergence or collaboration around an open standard for capturing those pieces. But I'm just curious about your thoughts there.
Oh, you do need an open standard, and you need an open and at the best of times is an open source software. The problem with software is, and I know that Hoverlay is not going to do this, but it's been done in the past. A very important piece of software that artists use, that all of the artists at the Augmented Landscape used, and all artists around the world used, was Layar, Layar. And it was bought, it was a Dutch software bought by a British company called Blipbar, which also wanted to do something, but who then went and, as I understand it, borrowed way too much money from the Saudis and went broke. And so in going broke, rather than not killing their company, they jettisoned Layar. And all of the work that was ever done in that has disappeared. It's one of the really sad stories. And it's not unlike a lot of video formats that we can't see anymore because the technology doesn't exist. But with Layar, you can't even transfer it to a new technology, which is too bad. So all of it's a real issue, and it has to be addressed. And thank God for companies like Hoverlay, which really reach out and help artists to do their work.
Thank you. And Michael, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think that like digital artwork is hard sometimes to to preserve anyway. I always worry about, like, I'm in my studio space right now, and I've got like 4 hard drives piled on top of each other, and I'm just like, oh my god, if anything happens, a lot of my work just exists digitally. So I think it's kind of, I'm not sure what the answer to it is, how you preserve it, or how you keep it for posterity. I'm not sure, but I think there's probably a way to come up with.
Yeah, I think there could be, maybe some emerging open standard that would be, even if there is not a player, but at least a human readable or relatively easy to understand description of what those experiences are, was based on open, assets.
I have a question.
Longer longevity, than
George, the layer artwork. You said that it totally disappeared. Like the artwork that was made and then put in AR, that wasn't, the artists don't have the original files for it, or was it?
They have the original files, but they're using a commercial piece of software to put it up in space.
But you can't translate it to another software.
Nobody's come up with one.
Interesting. I can't quite put my head around that. But that's interesting. So the difference for the stuff that we did, I mean, they exist in other forms. I mean, if it's a 3D model, it exists as a 3D model. If it's a JPEG, it's going to exist as a JPEG. If it's a video, it'll exist as a video. So if Hoverlay disappears and all the artwork, could still be placed in another with other software, so you could keep it that way.
Hopefully, yes.
All right, so I just want to make sure we give our audience a chance to chime in and ask questions. So if you don't mind unmuting yourself or raising your hand or typing questions in the chat, if you have any questions or comments.
Hello.
Hello, Iki.
I don't really have a questions, but what's more of thinking through everything that has been said. Yep. Thank you for hosting this great conversation. I'm a virtual reality artist, but that also means I'm kind of an everything 3D modeler and a spatial thinker, and trying to figure out really what the best medium is for everything that I make that exists virtually. We met through Craig Freeman, who I took his class in 2020. He introduced me to some of his AR artwork, and that was really interesting to me. And we were doing a lot of cross platform thinking together, because really, like, especially for example, in a class that we were taking together, we had some students who were joining from other parts of the world, who were just there virtually, and some students who were in a classroom, and then we were sharing VR art with each other, but also sending each other links to AR art. And so I'm just really passionate about bringing them more together, because while VR is a medium that's very focused on the environment where you're in, I think there are also really cool elements about that you can take out and then share as an AR form or something else.
Yeah, it's a great point. And many of the technologies, are shared. I mean, so the whatever you can do in VR, most likely you can do in AR with some adjustments. But I think they're almost like cousins, and there's a lot of similarities while they have their own specialties. So, having skills in one is definitely a good starting point.
Yeah, and also like with AR, you can technically go. The coolest thing would be if you can meet someone in VR through AR or other way around.
Yeah, I think eventually I'm sure we'll get there. There are a couple of comments as well around what is the best approach to help a painter get started in AR. Michael, maybe since you've been working with artists with no AR experience, what would you say for a painter to
I guess the first thing would be to figure out what you wanted to do with it. I mean, that's kind of like, like for me, the first step, like, how do you want your work to, why AR? Why do you want your work to be in augmented reality? And then that would sort of like lead you to what would be the best approach. They're probably, you're going to have to get your work into some digital format. So learning a little bit of Photoshop might help. I mean, the thing is that the biggest thing that I've taken away is that there's with 3D and being a non-programmer working in 3D and working, also I do VR work too. And as a non-programmer, I sort of, I have to learn a lot of things. So you have to decide what you want to learn. Like, do you want to take your painting and like, do you want to like start working in 3D, or do you want to just represent your paintings? So I think that may be like the first step is figuring out what you want to do. There's an artist in the show, and I saw she had done videos of herself, and she had cut her paintings out in paper, and she was just holding them in front of the camera. And I saw her on Instagram, and I was like, oh my God, that's AR. It's like analog version. So that might be like a good way to like sort of like do simple things like that, or put some artwork on a piece of glass in front of the camera or something like that before you like even touch technology. And then I think Hoverlay is a good way too. I mean, can anyone make an account now, or how does that work?
Yes. Yeah, now you can create a personal account on spaces.hoverlay.com and start experimenting with that. Just to bounce back what you said, I think there's this sometimes misconception that AR is 3D only, and because it used to be pretty much the center of gravity, but there is a lot of creation there's a lot of ideas you can bring to life using 2D and PNGs, cutouts, like you were saying earlier, collage, and using space, between 2D elements to create a 3D, to compose a 3D scene. It can be very powerful with audio, with relatively, I would say they're not simple pieces, but they're within reach, creating some audio, some images. And you can already do a lot today, in something like Hoverlay, for instance, but, I think so the starting point doesn't have to be that you have to jump straight into 3D, which can be daunting, at first.
I want to read one of my favorite quotes about being an artist from this book, High Art Down Home. And it's short, but I think it's to the point here. It's a painter who would tell his class this: I usually tell students that the artist is the only profession in our society where you have to be, first of all, a common laborer, second, a highly skilled technician, third, a highly skilled and or marginally skilled technician in other crafts than your own. That is, if you're a painter, you have to know about making slides, carpentry, crafting, matting, and crating. Technical skills in other professions than your own, unless you can hire them done, but most artists can't. Fourth, a small business person, an entrepreneur, a manager of your own career, which is part of that. But to deal with dealers, you have to at least prepare your own accounting practices for your accountant when you file your income tax, and so forth. Then finally, an intellectual. In addition to that, not finally, in addition to that, you also have to find a second profession to make a living.
That's true.
Well, George, on these great quotes, I don't know how we can top that. So thank you so much for,
You're welcome.
helping us close on a high and fun note here. I just want to thank everybody for, participating, and feel free to reach out to any of us. I'm sure George and Michael won't mind, continuing the dialogue offline here if you're interested. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.